Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, I'm Tristan. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. Recorded Content is brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. Podcast provides a way to have amazing conversations. And most B2B marketing podcasts feature conversations between a host and a qualified guest, someone who has experience around the main theme of the show. But that's as far as most podcasters go. A lot of podcasters don't realize that there's a way to share your company's expertise without having a guest at all. In this episode, I have Marc Thomas on the show. Marc is the head of growth at Powered by Search, which is a SaaS marketing agency that helps companies scale their MRR. During this conversation, we'll take a closer look at SaaS Marketing Bites. It's a show produced by Powered by Search, and it features solo episodes hosted by Marc, where he provides his own unique perspectives on specific B2B marketing topics. All right, Marc, first things first, thanks for joining me on Recorded Content today.
It is a pleasure. Yeah, great thing to do on a Friday afternoon.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you what, I wanted to start with a tweet that you had back in September that got my attention. I'm not sure if you remember it, so I'm going to read it now. But you tweeted, "For the B2B marketers listening, you get many more fans if you didn't make your podcast an hour-long back and forth interview. And fans are going to become so much more important for B2B and SaaS marketing in the next 3 to 5 years. So get used to it." So what made you want to write that tweet?
Well, I'm just going to say this at the start here. I mean, this is an hour-long back and forth, right? So
That's right.
No, look, it's I tell you what I'm talking about. So a lot of people, they start a podcast because they want more customers, right? Now that's fine. That's understandable. I totally get why people do that. But many people do it because they want more customers, not because they want to help their customers or their listeners, or they want to help people become customers in a way that actually fulfills their needs, right? And ultimately, if you are a SaaS marketer, if you invest time in meeting your customers' needs, then you're going to do a much better job than you would if you were just kind of going, hey, I want some more customers because I want more revenue, right? Because customers who get their needs met, ultimately their pains resolved, they stay and they pay for much longer. And that's a win-win for them because they're getting their pain solved, but it's a win-win for you and your bottom line because, you're getting ROI from your marketing. Now, what I see a lot of the time, and I think everyone will kind of realize this, or at least recognize it to some extent. The tendency to do the kind of the back and forth interview often results in like fairly thin interviews. People often don't put, I don't want to offend anyone, but a lot of people aren't good interviewers, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And ultimately,
I'm offended already, Marc, but no, that's okay.
The content out there is like, it's like paddling in the ocean when you could be swimming. And there are just so many interesting genres that you could give people, so many interesting formats that you could give that would help people stay around and listen to you, absorb your message in a way that they can kind of get to like you. And ultimately, when they get to like you, they're going to realize, hey, this person has a product that solves my problem. And then they're going to convert. And then when they do, they're going to stick around. And that's the goal of SaaS marketing.
Love it. Yeah. And Marc, the reason I wanted to bring you on today is just because your podcast is a different format. And we're going to go through an alternative approach to just a standard back and forth interview. And we do that ourselves with Recorded Content. Not every episode that we release is a back and forth interview. We reflect and do solo episodes and founder series and things like that. And I think it's important to showcase the different ways to podcast because it is a flexible format. It's not something that just has one route to take for every company. That said, I did want to say, as a SaaS marketing agency with the name of Powered by Search, which you're the head of growth of, someone might not expect that a podcast would necessarily be a part of your strategy. So what was the initial spark that led you to say, hey, as head of growth here, I'm going to use a podcast as part of our content marketing strategy?
I was talking to Len Marcadan, the CMO at Podia, a little while ago. Actually, we just did a episode of our podcast with him where he was a guest, and one of the things that he said to me was like, I asked him why he focused on content, and he said, well, like if you hire a content marketer to run your marketing, you're going to get content, right? Mm-hmm. So to a certain extent, when Powered by Search hired me, my background's journalism. You're going to get content. That's always what I'm going to feel most comfortable doing. That being said, the opportunity for us at the time when I joined was to capitalize on, like, we have a brilliant blog. That blog is a fantastic resource for SaaS marketers who actually want to grow their companies. It's very distinct. People love it. They are like obsessive about it. They'll read every single article, and that's pretty rare. So we get a huge number of people through search already, and we get all of our leads, or when I arrived, we were getting most of our leads through search. Now, that's great, and that was kind of just performing. So we thought, okay, well, look, how do we go to the next level here? My strategy there was to say, well, look, a lot of people are consuming our written content, but there's a lot of things that we can do to make that more accessible to different kinds of people. So we speak to C-suite executives in like huge companies. They're busy. Maybe they don't have time to sit down and read a article about, SaaS marketing. Maybe they want to listen to it. At the same time, the kind of the sales cycles that we have are really, really long. So like you could be in our we could be talking about a deal for maybe, I don't know, like 6-7 months, maybe longer. And also once you hire an agency to run your marketing, it's likely that you might not hire another one for a little while. So, So there's like this element of redundancy. Now to help us be front of mind whenever someone in the market is considering hiring a SaaS marketing agency, we wanted to produce different kinds of content that you could feasibly consume any given day of the week. And potentially, if you wanted to, and you're really obsessive about our message, you could consume something every single day of the working week from us in a different format. And you would have the choice about how to have that, whether it's podcasts, whether it's webinars, newsletters, blog posts, whatever it is. And so it was really a choice of, hey, let's just expand what we do here to make it more accessible to more people and at a greater frequency.
And Marc, you mentioned that your background, and I caught this as well when I was researching it, you have that writing and journalism background. So what was your experience with podcasting when you went off to initially create SaaS Marketing Bites?
It's it's funny. I actually mostly worked in magazines, so specifically doing profiles of people. So it was kind of like, hey, lunch with whatever author. Like, here's what we talked about how they, their relationship with their mother, that kind of thing. That's what I did.
Yeah. Right.
And so I've always had a kind of an interest in being able to take an interview and turn it into something more than just a Q&A. I previously did a couple of packages for radio, kind of, again, sort of storytelling kind of packages. But really, before that, I hadn't done anything in terms of podcasts. I arrived in March of this year, like March 8th. And by like March 11th, we had a podcast because I was just like, let's just do it. Let's just learn on the job, right? I'm good at creating content. We're, as an agency, good at creating content. We can do this. Let's just come up with some different ideas and we'll just put something out there and grow as we go. And so that was it.
Well, tell me about those three. So March 8th to March 11th must have been a pretty eventful 3-day period. Tell me about how you got from, hey, I want to do a podcast to, all right, let's record and actually produce this thing called SaaS Marketing Bites. Like, what happened in those what was that? 72 hours?
Yeah, well, I'm a kind of person who, like, if I have an idea, I just want to do it, right? I just want to kind of try it out. I might fail. My kind of history is full of things that I've tried and not kind of pursued. But so it's 72 hours. That's a good point. So basically, I was like, okay, I've got ideas for at least 3 formats of show, and we're going to launch 3 shows in the next year, right? The first one is like a narrative kind of profile style that eventually became an Inflection Point. Then we had another one to do something around kind of marketing strategy, but it wasn't really clear what I wanted to do there. I just knew I wanted to have a podcast about marketing strategy. And then the third idea was to do like short episodes, so 15 to 20 minutes, where we'd cover off a specific topic that we have a lot to say about. Really, it was a case of, look, we're going to launch one of these.
Right.
What should we do first? First, like, couple of days, weeks in the job, you want to create momentum, right? So you want to get that feeling of like motion so that you can eventually pick up the speed. And I just was like, look, let's just take our blog posts, which people are obsessive about, and we'll just turn them into monologues. People seem to like my voice. I'll just read into a microphone one of these blog posts. And I just recorded it one day. I didn't ask for permission or anything. I just recorded it and said, look, this is ready to go. I'm going to put it out, Dev. Are you okay with that? Dev's my boss at Powered by Search. And he was like, yeah, totally, go for it. Within like minutes, we were getting comments like, oh man, you sound like the Headspace guy. That's
the only reason I brought you on today is your voice. Hopefully you'll say something interesting.
I appreciate it. You know, that's great. It's nice to have comments like that. It's a good ego boost. But within a couple of weeks of doing one of those a week, we were seeing like a business coming in based on it. And when somebody hires an agency, like, that's a high contract value. The ROI on that podcast was like days, or time to ROI was days. So that was it, really. Yeah.
Well, Marc, how did you pick? So you had like these 3 big ideas. How did you pick the one to start with first? Was it just like an easier execution to get your feet wet, or was there another mindset there?
Yeah, it was really like the kind of like 2 dimensions. The first dimension was, I know I can produce this podcast literally in an hour. I can get the first episode together because it's me reading a post that we've already published and then bookending it with some music and an intro, right? And a call to action at the end. That's so simple. We can get that out. But then the other thing was obviously just trying to create that momentum so that people said, okay, I'm going to tune into this now. It's going to be here every week. We had like a big library and I was like, okay, there's enough there for a year's content already. I don't have to do anything. I just have to produce it.
So when you go to hit record on that first one, like you said, you're literally articulating what's already on the written page. What was hard about that? Was it really that simple, or was there something that you were unsure of as a first-time host of this podcast?
Well, I'd love to tell you it was hard because that would make for a more interesting story. But honestly, this is the easiest win that I've ever had in marketing, is producing this content, because it's easy to produce and it creates a huge amount of value for the company, but it also creates a huge amount of affinity for our brand. And that is good from the sense that it's great for the company, but it's also good for the customer because they stick around and they get a lot of value over a long period of time from what we say. So I'd love to say it was harder than it was, but it was incredibly simple. The only thing I will say though, is when I think about the kind of the obstacles, I'm thinking like, okay, was there a technical thing there? No, I feel fairly confident using a microphone. I can edit using Descript and, I'll just publish through Transistor or whatever. Done, right? Technicals are gone. That's fine. On the other hand, one unknown for me was, hey, like, what would be a good number of listeners for me to have from this within, 1 month, 3 months, 9 months? Like, what should I expect? Will people care about this at all when it's already on the page? Like, they can go to a blog and read this thing. And how will I make sure that, I can attribute any kind of leads that we get because they've listened to this to that work? Like, because ultimately at some point I'm going to have to say, is this good value or not?
Right.
And those, I would say those were some challenges that I had in my kind of headspace, but actually it turned out not really any of them were real problems. They were just kind of, like slight mental blocks there. So, and just kind of anxiety about launching, really.
What did you land on as far as what would be a good goal as far as downloads and how in the world you're going to attribute anything to the podcast?
Well, I'll start with the attribution first. So there was really no way for us to attribute podcast listens. But I think about that in two ways. The first way is that when leads get on a call with us to see whether it's a good fit to work together, we always ask them, hey, like, how did you hear about us? Now, when I first started doing this, people were kind of saying, hey, I heard you on that podcast or whatever. And I was like, I haven't been on any podcasts. Oh, you mean the one that we make? That's cool. Right. And then after a few weeks, people started saying on those kind of sales calls or consultations that, hey, I just drove back from like Texas, and on the way home, I binged your whole podcast. Like, I binge listen. My wife hates your voice.
The one person that doesn't like your voice. No.
That's it. Anyway, and when I think about that, I'm like, okay, if somebody pays us because they've heard and listened and consumed so much content, like it's not the podcast necessarily, but it is that we're producing the right kind of content for the people who want to hire us. That is enough. And as I said, because of the high kind of average contract value of our agency, it makes total sense to just make those bets. I think I'd have been a little bit more anxious if I was selling like a $20 a month product, that would have been more challenging, I would say.
Yeah, I agree there. And Marc, you mentioned that, in order to get this off the ground, a lot of these episodes were stemming from really the high quality catalog of content that you already had in place.
Mm-hmm.
So how, when you were starting out and you wanted to record that first one, like how in the world did you pick the first one to do? Like, how do you prioritize which episodes to construct around the content that you already have?
Yeah, prior to joining the agency, I'd actually read pretty much everything on our blog. And so I had an idea already of like, okay, these are the blog posts that are going to be the ones that sound good as well. Sound good as in there's enough structure to them that when I read them out, it will be structured in audio as well, right? Because that's obviously something. Like, how do you take someone along on a blog post if it's like a how-to? How do you manage your time or whatever? Like,
right.
You have to be able to give some kind of feeling of structure to your narrative, right? So I had read everything and knew what would work. I also went into Google Analytics and I looked at which posts were sending the highest number of key conversions already from content to sales calls. And I basically kind of, like a kind of cross tabulation, really. It was not scientific, but I was like, okay, these ones are converting at a good rate. These ones sound good or will sound good. And then, basically work off the list. As I kind of have gone on, I realized it doesn't matter. What people care about at 1 minute is maybe not interesting to someone else at that same time, but the next week it's going to be a totally different topic and they're going to love that one instead. And over time, because people stick with them because they're so easy to digest, like you can be sitting in the back of a taxi, if we weren't in a pandemic, and listening to a 15-minute call or 15-minute podcast with me effectively. And then you get to work and you're done, right?
So Marc, what for folks that haven't listened to SaaS Marketing Bites,
Mhm.
how would you explain the structure of that? Like, what are the different segments that you put in place? What layers do you add, and how do you segment your actual solo podcast format?
Sure. We have a very structured content process at Powered by Search, which I'm really, really proud of because it produces consistently high quality work. So I'm going to walk you through top to bottom what we do. So the first thing that we do, which I see almost no one else do, because we have several shows, we have, I think what they call it is sonic branding. So we have a sound that plays right at the start of every show that we produce and also right at the end. It tops and tails. And it's really recognizable. It sounds like someone waving a magic wand, but not like for children.
For SaaS marketers. Yeah.
I literally made that myself on this keyboard I've got here. And I was just like, hey, we need something to become recognizable beyond just my voice. So let's have an audio logo basically. Then we have like a kind of a pre-intro on the SaaS Marketing Bites show. It's just music. It just gets people into the kind of like, hey, this is going to be choppy and it's going to be easy to consume. Then what we do, so the kind of intro of every episode is I state a common belief that people have about SaaS marketing, some kind of thing. For example, most recently, most SaaS marketers believe that the marketing qualified lead is a relic of the past. Then I say, okay, that means that this thing happens. So pain, agitation, right? And then solution. And then we say, okay, but rather than thinking it's a relic of the past, you should think about it in this way because it will lead to this thing. And then we say, in this episode, you're going to hear, and then we restate that stuff, right? So you're 3 minutes into a piece, and basically you have a very solid understanding of how this piece is structured already. And that translates beautifully into audio because a person can decide quickly, okay, this next bit is maybe not that interesting to me. Maybe I'll skip ahead a few minutes, or I need to listen to the whole narrative. Then we'll do like the intro, which is just me introducing it and just saying, hey, welcome to SaaS Marketing Bites. It kicks back out. And then we just dive right into the meat of the post, which is, as I said, that pain, agitation, and solution formula, which we use on literally every single blog post and ultimately in every SaaS Marketing Bites episode. And then we just, right at the end, I pull it all together by restating the intro in kind of a more resolved way. So rather than most people think this, we just say, people think that, but here's what you should do. And now you know how. And then we go out into an outro, which is like a call to action to say, yep, sure, check out our blog, because I'm aware that not everybody wants to book a session with us, like, or book a consultation with us right away. We never really do that. But, say if you want to do something about it, you can. And then follow me on Twitter is the kind of the other call to action where we share a huge amount of stuff also. And then back to that audio branding and then out for the next week. And that's how the episode's structured to make it palatable as a format in audio.
Love that. And I love that framework that you share. We use something similar. It's called and, but, therefore. Have you ever heard of the ABT framework?
No, but that, I think that from you saying it there, it makes sense to me. Lots of people have like a version of this. So there's also ADA, which I always forget which one of those, which letter means what, but they're kind of classic copywriting techniques. I think pain, agitation, solution is just such a kind of a given for us, especially as our main kind of message is target customer pain points. It makes sense.
Very good. Yeah. And it's when you look at these frameworks on the surface, they're relatively simple, but I just feel like folks don't take them and apply them. It's that execution side. It's like, hey, here's your format. If you just use this and kind of fill it in, you'll have like a really good structure to follow each and every time. And then you can improve it as you go along. But some people just don't even have those, those signposts in place when they record an episode. So Marc, once you have your blog post written, you add some layers in here to get it ready for audio. When you go to hit record, I feel like a lot of people are overwhelmed with recording by themselves on the mic. There's no one else to lean on. So how did you get to that point where you were comfortable with that solo episode format out of the gate?
Well, Tristan, I love the sound of my own voice.
You love your voice. Everyone loves your voice.
No. Look, this is interesting. So most of our audience is in North America, right? I think there is a cultural affinity for a British accent from North Americans. I don't have the classic British accent, but I can certainly put more of a British accent on than I normally speak with. And I was like, if I do nothing else here, people will at least like hearing this, and that will make them stay around longer, and therefore this will probably work. So I sort of at first just kind of encouraged myself. If you listen to the first episode of the show, it's way more kind of like Queen's English than I normally
didn't listen
do
to it with that through that lens. So now I'm going to have to go back.
Yeah, you will
detect the accent difference there.
But realistically, I just thought, look, let me produce like a high quality audio file here where both the sound is good. It's not like echoey computer audio. It feels like I've gone into a recording booth, and well, for most people, clearly audiophiles will notice the difference. But for most people, it'll sound like I've done that in a proper booth, and that, like, at the end of the day, I've put a lot of effort into this. I think you have to get used to the fact that you're not going to like your own voice, or most people won't, and just realize that if you are in that group, almost everybody who's ever recorded their voice was in the same group at one time. And really, you sound so much better than you think you sound. That is, I think, encouraging for a lot of people. I mean, as I said to you at the start here, I've had a lot of practice at listening to recordings of myself because I interviewed for so long. And prior to automated transcription, you had to manually transcribe everything. So I would listen to myself on my dictaphone, like my actual mechanical dictaphone at 0.5 speed for days on end, transcribing interviews with sources, and, sound like a stoner at 0.5. And so, like, honestly, 1x is just so much better already. So yeah, I think, like, I had no questions about my kind of ability to actually produce a good sounding show, even though, I could, in the background, and again, you can hear this on the early episodes, I knew like my old microphone had a big ding in it. And I could hear the condenser like going, and stuff like that. But all that stuff that you're aware of, no one else can hear unless they're like an audio file.
Which probably isn't the majority of your audience anyway.
Most people are not into that.
Yeah. And are you recording? So what are the mechanics of it? Are you recording directly into Descript, like you mentioned, or are you recording using like Zencastr, Squadcast, or some other application, then pulling it in later?
Yeah. When we first started out, it was different. So first episode I did I had my Yeti mic there, and I was doing it directly into Descript, and I stuck a whole bunch of pillows behind my microphone because it makes it better, but also it is ridiculous. It was on a shoebox. I didn't even have a stand. Like, it was like a real hack together approach, but it brought in a lot of money for the agency. So soon I upgraded. And, I still record directly into Descript. I like it as an experience. I find it useful. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but yeah. And now I have a better mic on a boom arm, and I keep it set up all the time. So because I do so much audio these days, and I just, put it right in front of my face. And I don't need any shoe boxes or cushions anymore. So
pillows.
That's it.
Yeah, I always love to hear the breakdown of phase one of the show. It often includes pillows or sound blankets or buried in a closet somewhere just to get it in place, to get it down and to start the process. So you're no different than a lot of other folks for sure.
I mean, I used to record under my duvet on my bed when I was doing stuff for radio previously, which is like, you never see that in the notes, do you? I will say the other thing that made this show so much easier to produce is when I first started doing it, I was doing it directly into Descript. So each episode's recording overall would probably be half an hour maximum, maybe 25 minutes, maybe 20, because I would obviously make mistakes, right? So that's why I like Descript, because I was going back through, I could read the transcript. It was easy for me to just delete words and make it sound like I'd never made a mistake before. Realistically, I was making huge numbers of mistakes on the actual dictation of the piece. After a little while, maybe like 6 months, we actually outsourced that to Hatch. Not sure if you're familiar with those guys.
Yeah.
And what I do now is I just read through it, and whenever I make a mistake, I just say, oh, hey, let's just scratch that last sentence and I give audio cues and things to say, hey, let's put the intro there, stuff like that. That has sped up the workflow hugely. I know that's not something everyone can do because of budget, but hey, neither did I at the start. And, eventually we invested in it. So you got to set your your expectations that you're not always going to do all the editing and stuff yourself if you're doing this on a kind of like a minimum viable podcast, basically.
Yeah, at some point you have to transition to that next phase where you are outsourcing that editing piece. And it sounds like that note process and how you're sharing the audio cues and stuff works for you there. And I'm curious, have you used Descript's overdub feature to kind of duplicate the Marc Thomas voice? Or has that worked at all?
It's not possible, mate.
It's not possible. AI is not that sophisticated yet.
No, I did set up my voice on it, and I found it unconvincing.
It's not quite there. I would agree. It helps like for a couple words, or every once in a while I feel like it can fill in the blank, but
yeah, I had to re-record something that I did yesterday to change one number in the piece, and I thought, I should have just typed this in. That would have been good, but nah. I find it unconvincing.
So now that in the stage you are in place now, where you're doing some of the editing externally, you get back the files. Like what you mentioned, Twitter earlier was a big piece of your distribution. Obviously, you have it on the website built as well. What all consists of your distribution around the podcast once it's ready to be published?
Yeah, I think it's three big things. The first one is email. So we send emails out probably twice a week, once with a new blog post. Whenever we publish one of those, we send out an email. The other time on Monday morning, 9 a.m., whatever time zone you're in. And that one is like a practical kind of a piece of marketing insight for the week. If you wanted to apply it to your week, you'd probably leave feeling like you'd accomplished something. That's the goal. I usually, if we've published something that I think is a particularly good episode, I'll include it in there and maybe make the email about the episode itself. So we've got like blog post, podcast, email, right? So there's like a whole thing, and it's kind of repurposing that. I may also then take that email and repurpose that for Twitter. So much of what we do is about creating once and then repurposing for many formats. I did have a kind of a pretty formal structure in place for doing that. I literally had a to-do list that I replicated every time in Todoist. And we kind of automated that, and that was good. But you know what? I found that like, as I was doing that, we were producing so much content that it just became like obviously formulaic. So now I still produce that to-do list every time, but every time one of those to-do items comes up, say, write a tweet or write a thread about this, I think to myself, will that meaningfully impact somebody's day? If I tweet, a lesson from this, is that going to be good for somebody today? Because if it's not, I'm just going to mark it as done and not do it. And really, like, that kind of is, going back to that whole ethos of like, your question at the start about, why shouldn't we do an interview show? It's the same reason, because your audience has a lot on and they are trying to work out like what the heck to do with their lives on a day-to-day basis. If you're not going to help them, then like, just don't say anything. It's okay not to say anything. You're going to produce content. You're going to produce a lot of distributed kind of messages as well. Don't worry if you're not doing the whole checklist, is my advice to anyone thinking about this.
Yeah, I love it. I wrestle with that too. I mean, we do something similar where we use ClickUp to really manage everything for some customers, but obviously through Motion and the shows we produce. And I'm with you there. Sometimes, I feel like, is this going to be helpful enough? You kind of ask yourself that question. And sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. And I think that's a piece of it too. And you kind of feel it the more that you do and the more consistent you are. So that said, consistency is a big thing that I want to uncover too with you. I mean, you've been producing, I think last time I checked, there were 38 episodes that were released this year.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you started on March 11th, I think was the date, after that 72-hour strategic brainstorm that you put in place. So what's the secret to consistency for your company?
Well, we had an advantage in that we already had a very high quality queue of content to produce, because we were just repurposing something that we'd already done and were happy with, right? Which is ultimately our blog posts. Now, we publish normally 3 articles a month. So at some point we're going to run out of episodes, because we release 4 times a month in terms of episodes of SaaS Marketing Bites, right? So there will come a point where we're like, hey, we have to maybe think again about what we're doing here. I'm kind of thinking about that now, because it may happen in the next 6 months. So that's the one thing that really made this super simple, is that we already had all the episodes written. Now, could you write 2,000 words a week that are like genuinely useful? You probably could, but not everyone is going to be able to produce that. So I think it is a real advantage to have that, and maybe thinking about, okay, well, what could I do here? Maybe I can write 1,000, and then I can kind of supplement that with a bit of an interview with somebody, right? So you've got like a monologue plus something. Now that makes it a really interesting concept in its own right, because now you're not just the person speaking at the microphone, you're also the person getting expertise from somebody else. And I think, for us, I think we'll probably end up with a sort of more of a magazine style episodes to our podcast as we kind of run out of blog posts in the queue. But going back to the original point, the key for us to consistency was just having a simple to produce format and being very structured and disciplined about it. So every Thursday morning, I record an episode. Every Friday morning, I edit, or previously edited, the episode. It goes out on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. And then on a Wednesday morning, I set up the distribution list in Todoist, and then I follow that because it has dates attached to it. And that's how we've managed to be so structured over time, is literally there are 4 events that I diarize every week on recurring to-dos.
That's the key too, in order to be consistent, I think you have to demonstrate some consistency up front first, right? You need to get some of those tasks in place and commit to it regardless of what's going on. Put a time block on your calendar, get it done. Yeah. And you have to do that. You have to prove to yourself that you can be consistent before you start to flex that a little bit. So I wanted to ask, and you alluded to this a little bit with like a magazine style approach. But you've gone from the pillows behind the mic to where you are now, and you're outsourcing some editing. Where else are you looking to improve as you roll forward into the new year with SaaS Marketing Bites?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think the biggest change will be that, probably about March next year, we're gonna hit a point where we need to think, okay, what's the format here? Is this the format to go forward into 2023 because we've been doing this a year now, got, 52 episodes, by the point that we hit this conversation. Like, what does it look like to continually provide value? Because ultimately our agency only covers a small set of services, right? We wouldn't call ourselves a full service agency like a lot of people do. Like, we specifically help you with SaaS, demand gen, SEO, and PPC. There are only so many topics that you can meaningfully cover off in that without becoming like a news show. So we're going to have to think, what's the format here? Now, maybe we end up doing like remixes of old shows and putting the best bits together into some kind of new kind of, I don't know, maybe once a month we do like a different style of episode, or something like that. Or maybe we do have a guest come on and kind of supplement for like 5-10 minutes. So I think really that's the consideration going forward. Audio quality now feels like way above what is necessary. The kind of like the marketing is there. People are listening more frequently. The numbers are going up. The revenue is going up. Like, it's pretty good. That being said, Tristan, like, overall, I'm always thinking to myself, like, hey, can we kill this thing before it like dies?
Before it dies, like,
right?
Like retire on top or something like that.
Quit while you're ahead rather than kill it before it dies. I think the most interesting organizations are the ones who go, this is great, let's stop doing it. And then go, hey, let's produce something new now. So I'm always thinking, what's the next format? Because, well, I just like producing content and doing that in a way that's helpful.
Well, as a podcast agency, I hope our listeners don't take your advice and kill their podcasts. But Tristan,
I hope they do, but then they hire you to do the next thing.
There we go. We'll figure out something else to do. Yeah. Sounds good. Well, hey, I wanted to ask you, speaking of podcasting, before you kill these things off, I have to ask you, I think you rolled out the third podcast, I believe.
Yeah.
Powered by Search, right? So you have like a slew of this, these episodes going out. So you obviously enjoy the format, but what has drawn you to podcasting so much since, earlier on in the year when you really took the plunge with SaaS Marketing Bites?
Yeah. Well, I do enjoy it. I enjoy producing audio. In fact, I've done video as well. And I just, even though my whole kind of career has been about producing written content, whenever I've done audio, whether that's for radio or for podcasts, it's just fun. It's enjoyable. People seem to respond well to it because they just like they like consuming audio content. It's easy, be listening in the bath, and it's great. Or you can be in your car or like cooking or whatever you're doing. And that's convenient. You've got to be standing around looking at a device to be reading the same thing. So I think for me, it's the format. I also love that the more that you think about production as well, the more exciting it can become. So our show Inflection Point is a narrative style show, and it's done in the style of an interview, right? So I interview someone and then I go off and I chop up what they've said into sections. And I think, okay, what's the narrative overall here? And then I write a script in between the highlights in Descript. I write my own stuff directly in there. Then I go in and I go, okay, well, like, there's the script. I'll record that. So then I've got like an interview style show, right? But with a narrative. Where it sort of elevates beyond the interview style is when you think, okay, well, look, how can I make this resonate more deeply and be more memorable with my listeners? So an example here would be an episode I did with Rand Fishkin, co-founder of Moz. Rand left Moz and then had a sort of, I would say, quite kind of a relationship breakdown with his successor, and things got quite sour. And, he was telling me this story, and, it was emotional for him, and he cried And he said, "Oh, this is the first time I've ever cried on a podcast." Now, if we just do that as an interview, it's fine because it's already emotional. There's already a lot of kind of quality that gets somebody to stay around and listen because they're interested in that. But I thought, okay, like, how can I make this more relatable? And ultimately, Rand Fishkin is a guy who made a lot of money building a company in a way that most people won't ever do that. So that's not, like, as relatable as he is as a person, that story alone is not hugely relatable.
Right.
So I took something way more relatable, which is my relationship with my old co-founder, which we almost had like this relationship breakdown. And I interviewed him and almost without speaking kind of too much, I used the audio from that interview and laced it throughout the audio of Rand's interview and added some music and the occasional kind of narrative from myself. And suddenly that episode went from like a 7 to a 10. And I think that is not as achievable in writing for most people. It's not hard to do it in audio, but it's like very hard to do it in writing because you really, really have to work hard to be engaging in the written word. You have to work much less hard to be engaging when you're speaking to someone. And I love that.
Yeah. I love that episode. And I think I even heard that first, even before SaaS Marketing Bites. And I think we even talked about that in our pre-call where I had even a similar experience with a former business partner, a great friend, and unique situation where you have to go separate ways. And that's a painful experience for a lot of people. So you did a great job relating that to, like you said, not everyone's like Rand where they have that startup experience and the success of Moz to move on to something else. People have different experiences at different levels, and I enjoyed it. So I think that's a great place to stop, Marc. Where can people go to find out more about not only SaaS Marketing Bites, but Inflection Point and some other things that you have going on, and also yourself?
Sure. I think the best place to go, there are two places. The first one is poweredbysearch.com. We've got a blog on there where, hey, you can read transcripts of all of our episodes. And then the other place I would say is come check me out on Twitter. I am Marc Thomas. That's my handle. It's Marc with a C. I share loads of interesting things about SaaS marketing in particular. So if you like it, that's a good place to go.
Awesome. Well, Marc, thanks for joining me on Recorded Content today.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, man.